your boy Alex. Today's Monday, and I said I was going to take a break, and I am going to take a 2 to 3 day break. But I want to give you one more YouTube video before I take my 2 to 3 day break because I'm working on a very big project, and it's going to be something I've never done before. It's going to be something that's going to take 2 to 3 days to do, but I'm going to make a video called sex game called the top 10 YouTubers that you should actually watch. And when I mean that, it's going to be a special project. This one's also a special project because this one is something that is like 14 years in the making. And I wanted to make it up to 20, but I realized if I try to make the number too big, it might take 5 or 6 videos to film. And you guys got a long schedule because some of y'all got clothes you got to wash, bills you got to pay. Y'all got kids and grandkids to babysit. You got your car to wash, food to cook. And there's other YouTubers you want to watch. So, let's get started with this one. This one's called Sex Game. The top 11 greatest action sagas with the most films in film history. Now, this is a video that is 14 years in the making. Because when you look at great movie franchises, and we're doing movies, I will eventually get to television shows that have the most seasons or the most reboots. But we're doing movies because I like movies. And I should be putting on my old t-shirt that says Alexander Sactiloni Film Productions to show that I'm passionate about filmmaking. Alright, this one is going to be at number 11, John Wick. Now, I couldn't decide if I wanted Matrix or John Wick. John Wick's more current. More people are familiar with John Wick. You know, John Wick's had 3 films. It's a trilogy. And it's been green light to get a John Wick 4. Now, you might have to wait 2, maybe 3 years later for a John Wick 4. But you're getting the John Wick 4 and Matrix 4 around the same time, played by the same actor. So we're going to actually put Matrix on this list and put a tie. We're going to put the Matrix and John Wick together. Now, Keanu Reeves is by far one of the biggest action stars in Hollywood cinema history. We've never had an actor come in, do 3 Matrix films, and then almost a decade and a half later come back, do 3 movies called John Wick. That's badass. I love the first John Wick film. I actually saw the movie one day after it came out, and I remember it was an empty movie theater. And the story about you kill a guy's dog, you rob his car, his wife dies of cancer, and then he comes back out of retirement to kick somebody's ass. To me, if they did not ever cast Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, he could have actually been Wolverine. And the fact that we got a highly anticipated badass sequel, John Wick 2, more action, more kick-ass. My dad loves the hell out of John Wick. He liked the first one. The second one's better to him than the first one. And then there's John Wick 3, which picks up right after where the second film left off. And then in that third film, they tease there would be a 4th film in the franchise. So I'm looking forward to seeing a John Wick 4. The reason why we're tying it with The Matrix is because The Matrix 4 and John Wick 4 are going to be filmed back to back. And somewhere around 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years later, they're both going to come out around the same time with the same actor. And the fact that John Wick was just a concept of, it was just supposed to be a small, medium budget movie. And then over time, it blew up to a Hollywood big blockbuster with the next 2 films. Now you're getting a 4th film. And who knows, they might actually go up to 5 or 6 films. You may never know. They might do a John Wick crossover with another badass character. Like, imagine if they did Transporters. Yeah, just imagine if they did that. So the ideas for his character is endless, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do with Matrix 4. I always felt that the 3rd Matrix film should have been broken into 2 parts to flesh out the story of the city of Zion and find out what actually happened. Coming in at number 10 is Mission Impossible. Now, you might say, how come this is not rated higher? I'll explain why. Tom Cruise loved playing Nathan Hunt. You know, the idea that you get to work for a secret service, you're the main character, you have your own crew, you fight all the terrorists, you fight all the bad guys, you kick ass, you take names, you get the girl, and at the end of the day, you're the hero. It was like our version of James Bond. Like Mission Impossible was like the answer to James Bond. Like, there's James Bond, we got Mission Impossible, we got Nathan Hunt. And it started off with one movie, it was a smash hit. Immediately, the studios wanted a sequel. We got Mission Impossible 2. You get the best director that money could buy. You get John Woo, who's an action director. Watch a lot of his films. And part 2 is better than the first one. Then you get Mission Impossible 3, which I thought was not that well received. Tom Cruise even admitted that it had too much dialogue, not enough action. You know, all the action came towards the second half of the movie. He made for it when he came back with Mission Impossible 4. And then to take it one step further, he made Mission Impossible 5. And then we thought the trilogy came full circle with the 6th film. And then because of the accident, or you could say lockdown, he had ideas to write what? A Mission Impossible 7. So it was supposed to be finished at 6 films. Now there's talks to do a Mission Impossible 7. And you know, if Mission Impossible 7 is good or great as the other films in the past, this franchise might stretch it out to 8 or 9 films. Don't be surprised or shocked if it's 7 years later and it's not 6 or 7 films. It could be 8 or 9 films. Because this is a franchise. When you hear the name Mission Impossible and you hear the name Tom Cruise, you know it's going to be badass. You know some shit's going to explode. You know somebody's going to get their ass whooped. And when you hear that theme song, that is our answer response to James Bond. Mission Impossible is our James Bond. That's why it's on this list. Coming in at number 8 is the Dark Knight trilogy. For years and years and years, people complain, how come we can't get one actor to play Batman in 3 films or 4 films? You know, Michael Keaton played Batman twice. He was supposed to be the man to do all 4 films. And he did 2 films, and then they fired Tim Burton, and then we never got our fantasy. You know, Val Kilmer came in, played the character once, then George Clooney came, and it seemed like we just could never get one guy to play the movie 3 times. Then here comes Christian Bale, and Christian Bale does something in Batman/movie cinema history that's never been done before. That is, play the character 3 times, 3 movies. They're all number 1 at the box office. Each time he does Batman, it's better than the last film. Now, say what you will about The Dark Knight Rising's ending conclusion, but he did play the character 3 times, and that was a big-time franchise. And they did have ideas for a 4th Batman film that could have somehow brought him back. And of course, you know, you hear the stories on the internet all the time. So, and it was by far the most action-packed of cinematic history. And you had one director for all 3 movies, where we couldn't get Michael Keaton and Tim Burton to do 4 Batman films. We were able to get that with Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale. So that's why this is on the list. Alright, coming in at lucky number 7 is the Lethal Weapon franchise. Now, the Lethal Weapon franchise is one of my favorite stories. You get a badass soldier from the military turned into a police officer, a retired cop who is looking to retire, and the 2 team up and they take on dangerous criminals that's way outside their element. And the fact that they had success doing it. You get Danny Glover, one of the greatest African American actors of all times. You get Mel Gibson in his prime. And they leak this franchise. Now, you do have to understand there's like 10 different versions of Lethal Weapon. Like, they wrote literally 5 to 10 scripts of Lethal Weapon. And to this day, we don't know what is exactly the original story, what it was intended. So they just gave us the one we saw, and it was good. It was so damn good, it got greenlit for a sequel. Lethal Weapon 2 picks up where the first one left off. We get to know some more about Martin Riggs' character. We get some more backstory. We get some more story on Danny Glover's character. And it makes sense that it ties into the second film. Better than the first one. But the first one is always the best one because you had Gary Busey in that bitch. You had Mel Gibson. You had Danny Glover. You had an all-star cast. You bring in Joe Pesci for comedy mischief without overshadowing the movie. And it was brilliant. It was bright. I love Lethal Weapon. I saw it studio copy back when my dad had the hookup. My dad knew somebody that worked at the post office, and that's how I was able to watch Lethal Weapon and Die Hard studio copy. That's where I saw a lot of screenwriters, film directors, and this is at a young age. This is like at 5, 6, maybe 7 years old, and right there I'm getting a chance to see how it's done in the film industry. I saw the producers, I saw the screenwriters, the directors, and at that very moment, I decided right there what I wanted to be when I got done with high school and college. I wanted in Hollywood. I wanted to be the next guy to come in and take Hollywood by storm. You know, other people wanted to play basketball and football. Other people wanted to do rap music. I wanted to be a screenwriter, a film director, and an action star like Jean-Claude Van Damme, like all those other guys. And these Lethal Weapon films was having a powerful, profound effect on me. We got to Lethal Weapon 3. They took risk with Lethal Weapon 3. That's what I loved about this franchise. It's not like today's movie franchises where they're so watered down, they're too safe, they're too fucking scared, they don't do anything to add layers to the characters. And Lethal Weapon was not afraid to take an action film and take it into uncharted territories. They did it with Lethal Weapon 3. They took the character and they made it, what if Riggs could fall in love despite having all these issues. And it worked. People bought it. It was convinced. And they gave him a villain that was just as crazy as he was. That's what made Lethal Weapon 3 by far the best film in the whole trilogy. And then to have almost 10 years go by that they come back with another Lethal Weapon and make Lethal Weapon 4, which was like a reunion. And you add in Jet Li into the mix, and they were able to stray away from the original concepts, not make themselves predictable, and say we can make a fourth film in the franchise, and it ain't the same shit. And that's what I like about producer Joel Silver. He was able to say, this next Lethal Weapon ain't gonna be like the other three. And it wasn't. It still was an action movie, but it took a story that you didn't think could work, and the shit worked. And with that successful film, if they wanted it to, they could have come back with a Lethal Weapon 5. They could have, if they wanted it to, at the height of its popularity. People saw Lethal Weapon 4 and they knew it was going to be a big hit. You didn't have to tell them about Lethal Weapon. They knew it was going to be a big hit. Those are some real action films that open the doors for the next generation of action stars and action films and franchises of today. So you got to pay homage to movies like Lethal Weapon and Die Hard, because without those franchises, you probably would have never got what you got today. Coming in at number 6 is the Die Hard series. It currently has 5 films. There was talks for either a 6th film or a reboot. I'd rather see a Die Hard 6 than a reboot, because John McClane and Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is John McClane. The idea that you could be a police officer from New York City, come all the way to Los Angeles to fight with your wife that divorced you, and to have to deal with a terrorist, and you ain't got no damn shoes, you are hiding up in the ventilating system, and the catchphrase that he had in the movie. Every action star has to have their own catchphrase. You know, Arnold had plenty of them. You know, Sylvester Stallone would have some. Bruce Willis is something that everybody imitates to this very day. I mean, yeah, they kind of watered down his, the corny-ass jokes and the catchphrase. They made it PG. But back in the first one, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. You can't say that today. You say that today, you get fired from your job. You say that at the nightclub and the bar, security throw you at the damn nightclub. You won't get back in if you say some shit like that. I only said it once so you can understand how much of an impact that one film had. And it was a book. See, before we had Bourne Identity, we had Die Hard, okay? For almost 15 years, Die Hard was a book. And then the ideas of What if we could take a cop and have him do stuff that only people who are trained to do? And the fact that they came back with a sequel, Die Hard 2. Die Hard Part 2 was better than the first film. Part 3, not too many people really liked the 3, but you could tell it still was good because of its quality in filmmaking and storytelling. Then for almost 10 years later, out of nowhere, Die Hard 4, which I thought was kind of better than the third film. And then from out of nowhere, we got a Die Hard 5. And I remember they brought in the son, because my dad was predicting how he thought the trilogy should come to an end. Like, the sixth one should be, we come full circle. You know, do the 20-year anniversary of the first film and make Part 6 a sequel to the first film, which they had an idea for. And to me, I can't wait if Bruce Willis say, just let me do the sixth film to give the franchise a proper send-off, I'd be more happy. And I'm glad he spoke up and said, no, I want to do a Die Hard 6, no reboot. Because if you do a reboot, I'm going to be very fucking pissed. Because if it weren't for the Die Hards, if it weren't for the Lethal Weapons, you probably would have never got no Mission Impossible. You probably would have never got the Bourne Identity. You probably would have not got all these other franchises that came after that. Because these movies were taking risk. These movies could have bombed and failed at the box office. Because back in the day, they would do 1 or 2 films, that was it. Nobody in the 80s and 90s were trying to do 3 films, 4 films, 5 films. You know, Death Wish is another one that should be on this list. And, you know, why is it kept closed? Fuck it. Put it on the damn list and tie it. Death Wish. Because that was another franchise that came in the 80s. Death Wish was one of those movies that took one cop and made it where he didn't care who he went up against. It was like, he's a cop, but he's a vigilante. And you could just imagine if he existed in the world of superheroes, that was Punisher. Before you had Punisher, Death Wish was the Punisher. And you got 5 films with Charles Bronson. And then 20 years later, you get Bruce Willis, who comes in there, and what happens? We end up getting a reboot, but it's still like, it's what if the 6th film would have been. It got 6 films now. So now it's tied with, so Death Wish is tied with Die Hard. Alright, coming in at number 5 is the X-Men movie franchise. Now, the X-Men movie franchise was something that took almost 10 years to get on the big screen. When we got X-Men, just X-Men, nobody knew what to think of it. You know, people with extraordinary mutant powers that are in a big group to save the world from a mutant terrorist, Magneto. The idea, people thought it was childish. People just could not take movies like this serious in the 80s and the 90s. And finally, movies like Blade and Spawn went first. And then we had Spider-Man. And then the X-Men came. And then this movie was so good, it got a sequel. X-Men 2, to this day, is by far, hands down, the best X-Men film ever. Because of Hugh Jackman's portrayal as the Wolverine. And the fact that X-Men 3 kind of didn't really go in the right direction. It's not perfect. It completed the trilogy. Then we got the origins of Wolverine, which was the 4th film in the franchise. And then out of nowhere, we ended up getting X-Men First Class, which was on the same level as the first 2 films. And X-Men First Class kind of resurrected the franchise. Then we got the sequel to the Wolverine. Then we ended up getting X-Men Future Days Past. Then we ended up getting X-Men Apocalypse. Then we ended up getting Logan. Then we ended up getting the Deadpool. Deadpool 2. All of these, you know, so you look at the X-Men franchise by itself, and you could argue and say that's like 6 to 7 films. Then you add in the Wolverines and the Deadpool spinoff, and now you got a total of what? 11 films in the X-Men franchise. That's like literally 11 films in the X-Men franchise. And the fact that they've been around for almost 2 decades is incredible. No superhero genre has ever done that. And you see, Marvel and eventually would get the idea from X-Men, because Spider-Man stopped at 3 films, X-Men kept pumping out more films. Now, all the X-Men films, are they perfect? No, they're not. Were all those films what you wanted? Probably not, but they were the first to do this. And they made it possible that you could do a superhero franchise with multiple films and then carry 2 different spinoffs. Wolverine, a spinoff, which tied into the X-Men films, and then Deadpool 2 finally tying into the X-Men universe. So it's a total of 11 films. Coming in at number 4 is the Fast and Furious franchise. Now, it's supposed to just start off as one movie. You had Van Diesel, you had Paul Walker, and you had a story. It was supposed to be just one movie. That's what a lot of people forget. It was supposed to be just one film. And then all of a sudden you had a sequel. Sequel didn't do as good as the first one. Then you had Fast and Furious 3 Tokyo Drift. Again, it just wasn't measuring up to the first film. Then they made Fast and Furious 4 and brought the original characters back. And everybody rushed to the movie theater to see this story. Then we got Fast 5. Then we got Fast 6, Fast 7, Fast 8, Fast 9. Now we got 10. And then you look at the Hobbs and Shaw story. That's a spinoff. So you could say it's 10 Fast and Furious movies if you want. And then you could say Hobbs and Shaw is like its own story. But technically that's like 11 movies and a franchise. And there's no signs of this franchise stopping no time soon. Nope. And this is what Cars. It's like they took the idea of the X-Men, right? Follow the blueprints. And fast forward 11 or 12 years later, and what do you got? 10 to 11 movies of the Fast and Furious franchise. Now, John Capia said it's a good action roller coaster. It gets you pumped up. It gets you hyped up to go to the gym. It inspires you to get your driver's license. And he just said it was nothing but just that. That's John Capia for you. You know, if you watch his channel, The John Capia Show, he's a very good podcast, very good YouTuber, but he does player hate on the Fast and Furious franchise. He likes to give franchises that are real franchises credit and respect. Unlike him, I give every movie franchise second chances and third chances to get the benefit of the doubt. The one thing that's not on this video is the Transformer movies, because I can't put it on the list because they're not finished making Transformer movies. These are franchises you thought would stop, kept making movies, and then you thought once they made enough movies they would stop. This just keeps going. Fast and Furious is taking on its own life and its own identity. And if it ain't Paul Walker, God rest his soul, rest in peace, if it ain't Van Diesel, it ain't Fast and Furious, right? And it has been here for a decade and a half. And you could imagine them pop out Fast and Furious 11, Fast and Furious 12. By the time I get like 40, there might be 12 damn films in the franchise. There might be 5 spin-offs. There might be a Fast and Furious television show. You heard me say it first. Coming in at number 3, Star Wars. Whether you like the old Star Wars movies or the new ones, there's the original trilogy, that's 3 films. Star Wars New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, which to this very day, nothing touches Empire Strikes Back. You heard me. If there was any Star Wars movie I loved as a kid, a teenager, as a grown-ass man, it's Empire Strikes Back. Nothing touches Empire Strikes Back. It is the best film in that trilogy. You've got Darth Vader. You've got the badass snowtroopers. You got Obi-Wan Kenobi. You got Yoda. You got Luke Skywalker. That climactic scene. I am your father. No! Impossible! Search your feelings in the Force. You know it's true. It's the stuff of legend. Now, if you like the prequels, now I know a lot of people can't stand the Star Wars prequels. I know a lot of people give the Phantom Menace, the Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith shit, but those are a part of the trilogy that made it 6 films. No one has seen a science fiction do something like that other than Star Trek. Then you come back and you pop out Episode 7, Episode 8, Episode 9, and then you come with a spinoff, a Star Wars story. that caps it off to 10 films. So you can say 9 Star Wars films if you want, and then say 1 spinoff, but it's a total of 10 films. And it's been around for like 4 or 5 decades. You know, that's a long time to do something like that of that significance. And you know they're going to make episode 11 and 12. You know they're going to make episode 10, 11, and 12. You know they're coming. This franchise is not stopped yet. Coming in at number 2 is Star Trek. Star Trek got like 10 to 11 films. I mean, Star Trek stay making movies. Every 5 or 6 years, you graduate high school, here come a Star Trek movie. You graduate college, here come a Star Trek movie. You get married or you have a kid, somehow, some way, Star Trek come up. You can't never, ever complete a movie series without Star Trek. You can't. It's impossible. Coming in at number 1, and this is a tie, ladies and gentlemen. Normally, whenever I do who's number 1, is usually very controversial. A lot of men and women get angry and upset when I put who I think is at number 1, but this is a dead even tie. These are 2 of the greatest movie franchises in cinematic film history of action genre. You can say action genre, superhero genre. You could just say movie cinema history. These are 2 big global franchises that are on the same level. Neither franchise is showing any signs of slowing down. Both franchises are going to be around for quite a while. Now, who might falter in the next 10 years? Who might still continue? It remains to be seen. James Bond movie franchise and the Marvel Cinematic Universe are tied for the most films in Hollywood cinematic history. James Bond came in the late 1960s. It started off as a television movie. Nobody thought anything about being a secret agent at that time. And then it jump-started a movie franchise that has been going in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And it made people's careers in television and film. James Bond, all of a sudden, it becomes a culture icon. His theme song, smoking cigars, the fact he smokes cigarettes. He's a womanizer, but he kicks bad guys' ass. He saves the world. He gets the girl. And then there's the legendary Bond girls. And over a course of 50 or 60 plus years, you've had 20 or 21 actors come in and play James Bond. It starts with this one guy in television that nobody knew about. That's one guy. Here comes Sean Connery. Here comes Roger Moore. Here comes Timothy Dalton. Here comes Pierce Brosnan, one of my favorite all-time James Bonds. Then you get Daniel Craig, who is currently our James Bond. He's going to be retiring, and someone's going to step in and play him. And for this to be going on for like 4+ decades, it's unheard of. And James Bond kind of started it all with the secret agent. Because if it weren't for James Bond, there would be no John Wick. There would be no Bourne Identity. There would be no Die Hard, no Lethal Weapon, no Death Wish. None of these franchises, they would not be around if it was for that. This kind of inspired other film companies to create other versions of James Bond. Mission Impossible is our version of James Bond. And James Bond is like the real thing. There's other versions, and then there's the real thing. It's been around for 50, 60 years. You get these actors, between 5, 10 actors audition, but only the ones I named off got to play James Bond multiple times. There's the one guy who played James Bond once. Sean Connery played him 6 times, so that's 7 films. Then here comes Roger Moore. He plays James Bond 6 times. That's 12 films. Timothy Dalton comes in. He plays James Bond twice. Gives us 14 films. Pierce Brosnan plays James Bond in GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World's Not Enough, Never Die Alone. So that's 4 films, jumping it up to 15, 16, 17, 18. And then here comes Daniel Craig, who is the current James Bond, who's supposed to do just about 5 or 6 films, and it's already at James Bond 24, or you could say 25, because you know right after that they're going to tell you he always comes back and another actor plays the character. On the other hand, we've got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, people. We've got a movie called Iron Man that people thought would never work. And for years and years, people laughed at Kevin Feige. People made fun of this man. People said he would never pull it off. And he did, with a movie called Iron Man. Then we brought in the Incredible Hulk. Then we came with Iron Man 2. Then we came with Thor. Then we came with Captain America First Avenger. And then all of a sudden, the thing that kicked off Marvel Cinematic Universe for a decade and a half. Marvel's Avengers. And every time they did a big movie, they followed it up with the next big story, and then it led into another big Avengers film. And you see, that Avengers film gave us the possibilities. If it weren't for them doing that, you probably would have never gotten Captain America Civil War. You probably would have never gotten sequels. You would have never seen Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Spider-Man. I know some of y'all don't like Captain Marvel, but it gave us other characters and their own stories. And then to come full circle a decade and a half with Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, the second Spider-Man film. Now we're getting the Eternals. To answer that question, why they were not there throughout that whole entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. These are two franchises that are tied at number one, because they have the same amount of films. Once they finish with a James Bond 24, they're going and kicking right on to James Bond 25. And here's Marvel that did an entirety of 23 films. And here them announcing a 24th film, which you know is Black Widow. And then they turn around and here comes a 25 movie. So if I was to say right off the back Marvel would win, because they could crank out 25, 26 films, James Bond would probably would already have a script for James Bond 25, then they would come out and make a 26. So they're on the same level. And you want to know what's funny? It only took Marvel almost a decade and a half to get to the same level as the James Bond franchise. The James Bond franchise has had like 50 to 60 plus years. So they're both tied at number one. Some of y'all may call this controversial, but you know it's true. You give it another 5 years, there'll be another 5 films of James Bond. Marvel is going to come with Eternals 2, Eternals 3. Turn around and come with Ant-Man 3. Turn around and come back with a new Avengers. So these franchises will never stop making films. So in a way, they're going to be tied for the most films. And if you look at it in sports, there's the Boston Celtics, there's the Los Angeles Lakers. Just look at these franchises as that. So this is kind of like a going away present, because I will be taking a break for 2 to 3 days. Until then, peace.